For the time, it was, I suppose, a State of the Nation address, which we could unpack a little bit more as well with you. I spoke to Kevin Lings a little bit earlier, and we made note of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which just keeps on, or has now come up, and it was something that the EFF had touted for the longest time. Is it the right time for us to be having this Sovereign Wealth Fund discussion?
All right, so I think if we look at a sovereign wealth fund in pure financial terms, i.e. do we have a lot of resource flows or cash to fund it? Answer is no. However, I think it's important to pick up on a point that the President made when he distinguished between state-owned enterprises with developmental mandates and those that did not. Now, the state is still a significant owner of assets, and yet at the same time, and there's a significantly different culture between being in government and being in service, as opposed to the more hard-nosed business of running a business. And I think if we take some of those businesses in the state-owned enterprise portfolio, there's a lot of them that would actually benefit from a more professional management, as well as the added security of being in a ring-fenced and a bit more arm's length structure. So an example might be Foscor, for example, to be simplistic. Maybe even a superb business like the IDC. I mean, the IDC really hasn't put a foot wrong in a long time. That's a great business. It doesn't need more government. And it manages itself pretty well. So again, is that a candidate maybe to go into a sovereign wealth fund? Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, I suppose it just depends then the exact use. We'd have to get the prescription as to what it is going to be used for, what it's aimed at exactly, and perhaps then we could hopefully get the sourcing into that. As you said, it could certainly help in whatever regional play.
Yeah, it's a management
certainly
tool.
Is. Exactly. All right, let's get into the equity front. Some big news happening this week. A lot of the gold shares are making some waves as well. Anglo Gold, Ashanti deciding to pull out of South Africa. Harmony Gold deciding we'll take those assets, particularly Mponeng Mine. Then Goldfields also saying, look, we're still here to stay.
Yeah, I mean, clearly each of them focusing on what they do best. Quite interesting, of course, to see the Goldfields statement, but I think just to enable listeners to understand just what a long-term business a really big mine is. I mean, when I was a student 30 years ago...
that long ago? I'm 31. Just saying. Sorry, Warwick.
That's when South Deep was getting going under a company called Western Areas. I mean, so that was in the early 90s, and it still is getting ramped up to full production. So that's the kind of timelines that we're talking about mining, and how important it is for government to appreciate when the mining industry says we want and need certainty to make these significant commitments.
Are you finding that it is perhaps difficult trading in South Africa when you have an industry that is so full of potential, so full of so much that could actually happen from it, and investors perhaps shying away saying, but we're just not sure on your policies?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it obviously makes it tricky for a market to take a view on what's the right price, because I suppose that's also part of what makes markets. But I mean, if one investor's taking a view of 1 year and others are taking 10 years, well, I guess the guys taking the 10-year view are ultimately going to win because they're more patient. But in the meantime, there's a lot of other participants who potentially knocked out because the problems and volatility of whatever needs to be done knocks them out before their timeline's up.
Yeah, so you reckon it's a game of patience from here on in for the local economy as well?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it really must be unencumbered capital and so on that goes into markets. And I mean, as for the economy, well, we know there's a lot of work to fix the structural issues up.
Yeah, your biggest exciting point, I suppose, in terms of the markets and equities, perhaps going into next week?
Okay, so I think we obviously would look to see what kind of civil operations and infrastructural developments are happening. I mean, it's not as if nothing's happening, but it's I guess too slow for a lot of people's likings. And obviously, we're hoping to see some confidence getting shown by business now that they're starting to get green lights on their own power developments. I mean, the reality is, once again, on something like power, I mean, government has hit capacity issues, and clearly they need help, and this is one smart area to get help.
Yeah. Just under 2 weeks to go then as well, Warwick, until that fated budget speech by the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni. Warwick Lucas from Galileo Capital joining us here in studio to help unpack that market movement. Thank you so much for that time.